The General Assembly is the main deliberative organ of the United Nations. 193 countries belong, and the art of diplomacy is constantly tested. The new president at the helm of the 67th session is 37-year-old Vuk Jeremic. He spent the past 5 years as Serbia's foreign minister. Today, he deals with the world's problems, sitting down exclusively now with RT. Mr. President, thank you very much for sitting down with RT.
Thank you very much indeed. It's my pleasure.
You have assumed the presidency position in a very difficult time. These days, many would argue that the UN is dealing with somewhat of a crisis in confidence. Many see the institution as a stage where disagreements are more often displayed rather than all parties seeking or coming to any kind of agreement or solution. The most obvious example here is the crisis in Syria. Is the UN more about preventing international military interventions rather than resolving conflicts?
What I witnessed in the last few weeks was a delegation after delegation, and I had the chance to talk to almost everybody in the last couple of weeks.
91 bilateral meetings.
Right? It was 91 bilateral meetings in a week. It was a pretty tall order. What I tried to put forward is the necessity to act swiftly and to act so that violence is stopped now. In my opinion, the political future of Syria, that is to be decided first and foremost by the Syrian people. I believe it is strategically important, very important for the world, but it has to come second to the cessation of violence and hostilities. We just went through the general debate, which is the high-level segment of the session of the General Assembly, when all the world leaders come and they spend 1 week in one building. And we have a situation in Syria where 100, 200, sometimes even 300 people die per day. And all the world leaders come, they meet in one building, and they go away to their respective capitals, and very little or nothing is actually done. I think, quite honestly, this is my personal opinion, it's a failure of monumental proportions. Now, this is the best institution that we have, the United Nations. It has many flaws. It's got to be reformed, it's got to be revitalized. We've got to be very careful as to how we do it, because we must now break what we have, because what we have right now is the best multilateral institution in the world, with some kind of rules that, in my opinion, need to be respected.
The UNGA debate is actually probably the only time that you have all these powerful leaders in one building at one time. It is a rare occasion when delegations such as, the US delegation and the Iranian delegation are able to speak directly if they want to. Do they or adversaries, countries that don't necessarily get along, seize the opportunity to its full potential?
Well, in short, no. My feeling is that this is just not being used to its full potential. And I did try and talk with everybody, and when I asked them, did you have a chance to talk to this or that particular interlocutor that is very relevant and happens to be truly antagonistic to their position? They said no. And I was trying to be, nice and asking, why is it that you didn't use this opportunity? Because when are you going to have another opportunity? Maybe next September? Actually, there are political and, I would say, short-term political consideration, mostly driven by domestic politics, that are preventing those people from using the UN General Assembly meeting to the full potential.
General Assembly resolutions are not binding on states, even less binding on individuals. From what I understand, the GA is going to be considering an anti-blasphemy resolution, a resolution proposed in the aftermath of the violent reaction to the anti-Muslim film made in the US. If adopted, what can it achieve?
The decisions of the General Assembly, they carry significant moral weight. And given that they are reached inside the universal representation of the mankind, I think they do carry a very, very special message is currently going on with regard to blasphemy. It's something that, in my opinion, can seriously affect stability in the entire world. And it goes really to the heart of the civilizational frictions that are in many ways coloring the security, economic, and geopolitical situation of today. Now, there are a lot of people who have different points of view on this issue, and it's the religious feelings mainly versus the freedom of speech. As a president of the General Assembly, I will do my best to work with all sides, with all parties. There's generally two parties to this debate in the General Assembly, to make sure that the 67th session resolution on blasphemy does carry significant moral weight and is passed by a vast majority.
You have laid out many priorities for your presidency, including revitalizing the General Assembly. There's many ways in which you plan to do that. One specifically that stood out to me is when you spoke of bridging this divide that you say exists within the GA, the G173 versus the G20. Can you elaborate on what that divide is and how you plan on bridging it?
The G20 is an informal group of countries that got themselves together and started working together in order to discuss how to improve the world economic governance. The rest of the world, the 173 countries, are not part of this debate. There are a lot of suspicions, there are a lot of tensions stemming out of this fact that there are these 20 guys who are working together closely in order to change things, and the way they decide actually influence the entire mankind. One of the flagship initiatives of the Serbian presidency of the General Assembly is actually creation of a consultative mechanism between the G20 and the rest of the world, so that on one side the 173 countries that are not part of the G20 can contribute with their thoughts and ideas to the works of the G20, and that the G20 can actually benefit from their insight, the insight of the 173, and also in turn be able to better answer questions related to the legitimacy of the G20. It will make the General Assembly a place for economic discourse, for a discourse of one of the most important topics in today's world, and I very much hope that Serbia and Russia can work closely together in making it happen, because Serbia is presiding over the General Assembly this year and Russia is presiding over the G20.
You are the youngest person to ever be elected to the position of president over the General Assembly. If you don't mind me saying, you're 37 years old. What kind of message do you think this sends to young people around the world, but specifically also in Serbia?
In a way, I believe this was a vote of confidence on Serbia's place in the world. 20 years ago, our country was actually pushed out of the General Assembly. We were suspended from the membership in the General Assembly almost exactly 20 years to the date when Serbia took over presidency in 2012. We went through a lot of difficulties. We had in the last few years very complicated diplomacy to conduct at our plate, at times confrontational. But I think we did a good job. In the end of the day, we put in front of the world the vote of confidence in Serbia's capability to be a constructive, integral member of the international community. We won this vote, and we want to make the best out of it in order to show that Serbia is capable of contributing to world's peace and stability and working very closely with the rest of the world in pushing the priorities of mankind.
I want to ask you about an issue involving Kosovo. The European Commission released its report on the EU's enlargement strategy in 2012. With respect to Serbia, the European Commission has called on Serbia to respect the, quote, territorial integrity of Kosovo. Now, the report clearly implies, the way in which I read it, that Kosovo is an independent state. Now, that is despite the fact that Kosovo unilaterally declared independence in 2008 and still remains under the administration of the United Nations. What do you make of this report?
It is a report in the context of Serbia's accession to the European Union, and of course it is down to the Serbian government to decide how to deal with these findings and these recommendations. I'm no longer part of the Serbian government. I have full trust in the Serbian government that they are going to treat it in the way that is in line with Serbia's constitution and with democratic will, overwhelming democratic will of Serbian people. But when it comes to territorial integrity, as well as sovereignty, here in the UN, we are worried about respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries, of member states. Serbia is one such member state. Kosovo is not, and I don't expect it ever to become one. So my job is to worry about sovereignty and territorial integrity of UN member states, including Serbia. Kosovo is an internal affair of Serbia, corroborated by the Security Council's parameters set out in the Security Council Resolution 1244.
President Vuk Jeremic, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.